here I have this picture here of Carl Sagan. He was a famous popularizer of science. Back in the day, he made a popular TV show Cosmos in the 80s. You know, it was a big deal. Won all kinds of awards and stuff. He was also a professor of astronomy at Cornell and such, you know, a respectable scientist and so on. However, I'm going to use him as an example of how not to do history, because in particular his critique of astrology in this TV show Cosmos, it epitomizes what precisely this attitude that I have previously argued is the absolute wrong way to do history, namely the way that is based on judging past thought by modern standards in a very prejudiced and small-minded way, as opposed to the approach to history that I advocate, which is one based on empathetic understanding. But okay, let's have a look then at Carl Sagan's arguments against astrology. And here we have his first argument. Astrology can be tested by the lives of twin, he says. So you can have a situation where one twin gets struck by lightning and the other one, lives for a long time, and so that the two twins have a very different fate in life. Even though supposedly, according to astrology, your fate is supposed to have been determined by the position of the stars at the moment of birth, and since the twins are born at the same place at the same time, they ought to have the same fate then, because they have the same star. So that's the counter. What Carl Sagan says that's his basis then for his critique of astrology. So to this I reply, in fact, the existence of twins is absolutely amazing confirmation of the theory of astrology. Is confirmation that is as dramatic as any confirming evidence of any scientific hypothesis ever put forth. The existence of identical twins is an incredible, striking phenomena of nature. The fact that astrology predicts that if two people are born at the same place, at the same time, with the same position of the stars, they ought to be basically the same person. And they are. You have identical twins. They are the same. There are two people who are the same. You never in life encounter two people who are the same, except identical twins, and they're exactly the same. It's just like almost scary to see these identical twins. Like, how can it be that these two people are identical, And they are, and astrology predicts that they should be identical, and that's exactly what happens. So it's an amazing confirmation of astrology, the best kind of confirmatory evidence that any scientific hypothesis could ever hope for is that of this kind, having this kind of dramatic, striking, extremely implausible occurrence take place, that of identical twins, in exact accordance with the independent predictions of the scientific hypothesis at stake, namely the astrological hypothesis of horoscope astrology. So that's in fact not an argument against astrology at all, but a very strong argument in its favor. So that's what I say in reply to the first argument by Carl Sagan against astrology. Here is his second one. How could it possibly work, says Carl Sagan. How could the rising of Mars at the moment of my birth affect me then or now? I was born in a closed room. Light from Mars couldn't get in. The only influence of Mars which could affect me was its gravity. But the gravitational influence of the obstetrician was much larger than the gravitational influence of Mars. And so, these forces that Mars, by means of which Mars could influence a newborn child, are physically negligible, and you could just it's not conceivable that they would have an impact on personality or fate or anything like that. This is the argument that Carl Sagan presents. Well, to this I reply, this is a really mind-boggling manner of arguing. So what exactly is... So basically the error with this argument is he assumes what he's trying to prove. He's saying, look, the only way Mars could influence a child would be either through light or through gravity, but those forces, couldn't have any impact in this case because of the shut windows and the gravity is so weak. So therefore, it couldn't be. It couldn't be that the stars influence child. You know, this is a very ridiculous and irrational form of argument because the argument starts with the assumption that the only way Mars can influence a child is through light or gravity, and then rules out light and gravity, and then concludes that Mars could not influence the child. But really, though, what you need to prove here is that there is no other way other than light and gravity. Sure enough, if you assume that there is no other thing except light and gravity, then you can reach the conclusion that you want. But that's what you're trying to prove, though, that there is nothing other than light and gravity. So this hard so-called argument that Carl Sagan put forth is completely just stupid, honestly, because it assumes what it's trying to show. It assumes that there's no other kinds of influence other than light and gravity, when that is precisely the issue at stake, whether there is in fact other kinds of influences. So the argument proves absolutely nothing. It's blatantly circular. So this business is altogether ridiculous. This is very typical. Carl Sagan, he's obviously considers himself a champion of scientific rationality in many, that's his public persona very much. And whereas in reality, if you look at his arguments, we see that these are actually blatantly anti-scientific and absolutely irrational. And this is all extremely typical, really, of these kinds of people who just are so prejudiced and close-minded and stuck in modern ways of thinking that they are incapable of appreciating the point of view of any other person, and that therefore when they look at history, when they look at astrology or something like this, they just spew out their prejudices and then proceed to congratulate themselves for being so rational, when in reality they are their arguments are just ridiculous and have nothing to do with rationality. So this is the type of standpoint that we have to be on our guard against when we're doing history. We cannot judge the past in this prejudiced, small-minded way like Carl Sagan and others of his kind are always doing. So this is then the conclusion of my historiographical chain of argument that I have presented based on that initial distinction that I drew between the dichotomy between two approaches to the study of history, and I used astrology to as a illustrative case where I myself tried to present the rationale for astrology, and then I use Carl Sagan as an icon for the second way of looking at astrology. And I hope I have convinced you that my way is the more interesting and fun, stimulating and rewarding, enlightening, whereas Carl Sagan's style of doing history, which is the style of many people of his kind, is an approach that is just not going to lead to anything. We just live in an echo chamber of your own prejudices all your life, if that is your point of view. So that's the end of my argument in this regard. Thank you.